The Fresno Nightcrawler, also known as the Fresno Alien, is a cryptid that has made 2 appearances so far, one in Fresno, California, and the other in Yosemite National Park. With both sightings, it's only seen in video footage. However, a man in Poland is claimed to have seen the creature as well. It's also said to resemble the Carmel area creature, a cryptid which we'll get into now. The witness, a 60-year-old ex-Marine yet to be named, and his wife were driving near Carmel on December 12, 2014, when they came up over a hill and saw a 7-foot-tall, slender, gray creature, which is now known as the Carmel area creature. The witness said of the following: "We recently bought a place in the Fort Hill area. We first noticed after about 30 days of living here that we suddenly have a perfect circle that stays fresh green no matter what weather in our front lawn. On Friday night, the 12th, we were driving home. After turning on Carmel Road, which leads to our road, we went around the curve by the Carmel Church and then up a small incline approximately 10 feet over the incline, and in front of our truck, the alien ran across the road and into the woods. There have been many possible sightings of the Nightcrawler in the form of the Carmel area creature, a thin, armless, pale white humanoid creature seen in Ohio. The creature has also been spotted in Yosemite, where footage was again taken from what appears to be another security camera. This time there are 2 creatures, one being small, less than a half a foot, and the feet of the creatures can be clearly seen, as well as what appears to be some sort of webbing connected from the knees to the upper body on, at least. The cryptid has also been videotaped in Poland, this time from what appears to be a handheld camera, judging from the shakiness of the footage. The creature can't be seen for too long, but appears to have similar traits to the larger one taped in Yosemite. Now, are these aliens or extraterrestrials? A new species? Misidentified normal animals? Maybe just a pair of pants on a puppet hanging on a wire? Or something that's new, something we haven't seen before, or at least discovered quite yet. While there have been claims that they are a part of Native American folklore in the region, that has been debunked. The first sighting of a Fresno Nightcrawler happened in Fresno, California, by a man named Jose. Jose had a surveillance camera watching his front lawn and looked at the camera when he heard a dog barking. Some of the sightings are actually a pair of white pants being puppeteered, therefore a hoax. The alleyway GIF of the Fresno Nightcrawler was created by YouTuber Captain Disillusion by walking down an alleyway with a melon and then using digital manipulation to remove the top half of his body. His purpose was to show exactly how easily it is to fake a cryptid video. Overall, there is some evidence, but most evidence points towards the Nightcrawler being a hoax, although some carved statues mysteriously appeared, and the location of the statues are supposedly from a DMV. Nobody knows how they got there, and nobody knows that they're directly connected to the Nightcrawler phenomenon. Seeing long-legged, frail-framed stick people isn't out of the realm of the ordinary for some. The phenomenon of the black stick people falls into that category. The black stick men is actually rather recent, mostly said to have really taken off in the late 2000s, when across internet forums there began to circulate a growing number of accounts of people seeing a totally new type of anomalous entity. Usually described as very tall, impossibly thin black figures, typically devoid of any noticeable features, almost as if, as their name implies, they were crudely drawn stickmen come to life and stepped off the page. In some cases, they're even described as being actually 2-dimensional, becoming almost invisible when viewed from a certain angle, or even morphing between 2 and 3 dimensions, and their movements are at times said to be disjointed and odd, but in other reports very smooth yet unnatural. Reports of being dizzy or tired in their presence are also not uncommon, as well as a distinct sense of some sort of static charge in the air, and sometimes a sense of malevolence, although the entities are not known to be aggressive. Indeed, they are usually described as being rather skittish, acting almost surprised that they had been seen, usually escaping by creeping off into the night or simply vanishing into thin air. It all seems completely absurd, but there's actually a quite large number of supposed sightings of whatever these entities are, and they're every bit as bizarre as you might think. Some accounts even go far back through the decades, only recently cropping up from witnesses online, and one of these was related on a forum for 40 Times, where a witness known only as Simon claims that he had had an encounter with a stickman in Kent, England, way back in 1978. He says of his experience, "A group of about 10 of us were sitting chatting in the loose valley at about midnight. After about 45 minutes, Will leapt to his feet, slapping his head, saying there was a bee in his hair. He looked absolutely terrified. Both Dorothy and I saw the outline of a tall, thin figure wearing a hat dancing behind him. Will said later it was a terrifyingly loud buzzing that was coming through the top of his head. However, only Rachel heard any buzzing. We partly satisfied ourselves that it must have been a bee's nest, so we moved a little distance away. As we moved away, Dorothy and I saw a ring outlined in the grass, which enclosed where we had been sitting. Eventually it started raining, so we headed for Rachel's house. As we left, I turned around and saw the same thin black figure walking between the trees to where we had been sitting. Another encounter supposedly happened back in 1982 in Essex, England. The witness claims to have been a nurse at the time and to have had her brush with the outlandish entity as it crept up the shadows of her hospital grounds at night. She said, "In 1982, when I was a student nurse at Worley Hospital, Brentwood, in Essex, England, I encountered a stick person in the grounds of the hospital as I was walking home one night. It loped across the roadway, having been seemingly pressed up against a wall. It stopped when it saw me and raised its arms in fright and quickly walked off into the undergrowth. It was very tall, very thin, extremely long arms and legs, and a very small oval head. Totally black and no obvious clothing, I saw no face, even though it emerged very near a street lamp and so was well illuminated. I was terrified, and to this day no one believes me." This report is interesting in that it gives a relatively rare glimpse into the possibly malicious nature of these entities, as they are most typically described as having a menacing air about them, but being, for the most part, harmless. Another report comes from a witness named Amalthea, who posted her story on both Reddit and on the site True Ghost Stories Archive. She says that this happened to her as she was growing up in California between about 1997 and 2004, and that her strange encounter would happen as she was hanging out with her best friend Jenny. The witness said that she had kept to herself out of fear of being ridiculed, until she realized that others had seen the same thing. This particular account seems rather sinister in nature. "When I was growing up, I had a best friend who lived down the street. We lived in a quiet small town where her dad was always working. I would walk to her house every day after school, and we would often take walks to the liquor store to buy candy and etc. I would often see stickmen following us, peeking out from behind her couch. He was all black and changed sizes. Sometimes the size of a small cat, other times taller than normal-sized man. I felt very scared of him and felt he was a mischievous at best, perhaps evil. I finally got the courage to tell my best friend, and she admitted to seeing him too. I always got the feeling he was the same one every time, not a different stick man. One time he appeared in the shape of a stick figure horse, like a bad child's drawing. I always believed him to be somehow following me and watching me, until when my best friend passed away suddenly our senior year of high school. She had a genetic heart condition that nobody, including herself, had known about. I've never seen what we called stickmen ever since. I know, perhaps maybe he was some form of a Grim Reaper awaiting his time to take my friend. I don't know if that's really the case, but it seems odd the sightings of him disappeared after she passed away. I never saw who he dubbed the Stickman again. I'm researching him now that I'm in my late 20s, because I recently confided in my husband about these weird experiences. In quite a few cases, the witnesses describe having seen these creatures when they were children, yet the memory has remained etched into their mind and as clear as day. One such report comes from Reddit, with a witness who says he had a visitation from a stickman when he was just a very young boy. He says that one evening he woke up to a heavy feeling of dread and got out of his bed to go sleep with his parents down the hall, but he wasn't alone. When I got out of bed and opened the door, about 5 feet away from me in the hallway was a tall, black, slender figure that was very thin, all black, no facial features, a circled head. The arms and legs were really thin, and the fingers looked sharp. It made no sound as it was gliding and walked. The way it walked was the most scary part for me. I only saw it for 2 seconds, then slammed the door and started wailing and crying. Moments passed until my mother showed up to my door and calmed me down. I don't remember mentioning it to her, so she had just thought I had a bad dream. She then got a roll of blankets and put them in the hallway floor for us to sleep together. For some reason, my mom likes to sleep on the floor because she grew up that way. My feet ended up being scratched very badly. It couldn't have been my mom's nails, and I remember it left a burning sensation. I'm 18 now, and it's one of the few earliest memories I had. I still live in the same house in Connecticut. Another witness, who was a child at the time, says her and her parents witnessed a stick man from their moving vehicle as they drove home one night. The whole encounter is dripping with a certain sense of dread, although the thing in question did nothing to really threaten them in any way. I noticed something moving very quickly in front of the car. Here's where it gets difficult to describe. What appeared to be two black stick-like legs, as if the bottom half of a stick man, quickly ran past the car. Everything in that moment seemed to slow down, and I entirely lost my train of thought. The area around the legs even almost seemed static-like and blurry. Neither my mom or dad said anything immediately, so I shrugged it off, staring out into the night at a moving road. But as I started my sentence again, my mom interrupted me. "What was that?" She genuinely sounded terrified, and I knew immediately what she was talking about. I basically screamed back, "The stick man?" and my mom began panicking. My dad seemed very confused and pulled over, and we looked around the area when we saw it run. My mom said that she saw an entire stick man run from one side of the road to the other, tall, lanky, almost 2D, just like a kid's drawing. When she calmed down, she started describing everything about what she saw, including how it walked. This was only about 1.5 miles from their house, so we drove back, my dad still in a state of confusion and my mom and I nearly shaking. Ultimately, we came to the conclusion that everything in that moment was very hazy, as if time slowed down, and we were seeing into another dimension. What my mom and I saw and my dad didn't, I still have no idea. Both of my parents are very religious people, and typically try to debunk stuff like this. But they both agree that there is no way what we saw wasn't otherworldly. We began researching and found that we weren't the only people to ever see the stick man. When my mom read one post about the way it moved, I saw her heart drop. The post said something about claims of the thing galloping, which is exactly how she described it right after it happened. Normally, I'm very interested in stuff like this, but I was so terrified I just wanted to forget it ever happened. For some reason, something about the situation felt menacing. An even more recent report comes from 2015, with a Redditor commenter who said he was with a couple of friends on the night of this strange experience at around 10 p.m., taking a shortcut home through a dark alley that had the creepy detail that it also happened to be right up against a cemetery. This alley is pitch dark and pretty cold too. The only lights were all the way down at the end of the alley with some other lights as well. So we halfway went down this alley, and then I started getting a weird feeling, like I was being watched. But it was a different feeling because it's my instincts telling me I was for real being watched, but I thought I was just being paranoid. So we make our way down the alley into the light, and then I stopped and turned around while my friends were looking right at me. At that moment, that's when I saw it. Just coming into the light, very tall, 8 or 9 feet, very dark and very, very skinny, like a stick figure. And it was walking at us. I couldn't believe it at all. I remember saying, "What the hell?" And I ran as fast as I could. My friends ran behind me as well, thank God. We all made it out of the alley, so I turned around for the last time. It was where I first saw it standing, and there's no way, because I ran really fast, and nobody can be that fast at all. And the funny or worst thing was that it was still walking at us. We ran all the way home right after that. We talked about it in a group chat, not knowing what we saw at all. These creatures are seen all over the place, and another report comes from up in the Rocky Mountains. Out in the middle of nowhere, a witness was out setting fish traps at a remote mountain stream at approximately 2 a.m. There were apparently 5 of them out in the dark going about their work, or maybe 6 if you count the strange thing lurking about in the gloom nearby. After a buddy and I finished lowering a trap into the water, the atmosphere around us got real heavy. It felt like it was humid, but without the presence of moisture in the air. On top of that, our muscles suddenly felt real weak, as if we had just run a few miles with weights strapped to our backs. My visions and the vision of my friend went blurry for a moment or two. When it all cleared up, we all noticed that something wasn't right. Off in the distance, no more than 20 yards away from us, was this tall, slender, pitch-black figure. It looked to be about 10 feet tall, and its limbs were real skinny looking. It just stood there for a moment, its limbs just moving around real slow as it looked at us. The creature had a head, but no real torso. Its body was as thick as its arms were its legs, and it had a real skinny looking head with two bright white eyes. It just stared at us for the longest time. It didn't even make a noise. After a moment or so, the thing walked off to the side, and as it got farther away from us, it got easier to breathe, and we were able to move again. Naturally, we packed our shit and hightailed it back home. To this day, we don't talk about what had happened, and we never did go back for our traps. So those were just a couple of reports of these Nightcrawlers and stick figures floating around out there, and they're each almost stranger than the last. We're left with an array of accounts outlining these encounters with something that doesn't really seem to fit anywhere else in the world of the paranormal or cryptozoology. Just what is it are we supposed to be looking at here? There are a lot of ideas on what these things could be, such as aliens, ghosts, demons, interdimensional interlopers, something more akin maybe to the Black-Eyed Kids, or simply just tricks of the light, or even a flat-out internet urban legend in the makings, like Slender Man, the Hat Man, and Momo. Yet, the reports seem to be given with just as much earnestness as reports of any other paranormal phenomenon, and we're left wondering whether they really did see something, and if so, what it was. Absurd? Maybe. Crazy? Possibly. Very weird? Definitely. No matter what one might think of the stick figure phenomenon and the Nightcrawlers, the reports continue to come in of these crazy phantoms, and it seems like a new feature of the landscape of the paranormal that's here to stay. If you enjoyed what you heard, subscribe and leave a like if you want to, and come back with us here on Unknown Territory next Friday for another The Unknown Files.